Bibles to Deuteronomy chapter 6. What if I asked you to define or to describe your spouse with just one sentence? What if I gave you just one sentence for you to embody and encompass everything that is your spouse? What if I asked you to do that for your community or for your church? If you only had one sentence to describe to anybody that you come in contact with, this is who we are, this is what we're about, this is kind of an all-encompassing statement to give them an idea as to who we are and what we're about. What would it sound like? What would it look like? I took an opportunity this past week to look at on the internet some of the churches that do this. And I found some examples of churches that come up with sentences kind of like this. And I wanted to read a couple examples for you. One is where people gather to worship, share, and learn. A growing church serving a growing community. Where truth and love make a difference. We build hope. In the heart of the city, with the city at heart. Large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Transforming lives and building dreams. Reproducing authentic Christianity. The end of your search for a friendly church. A place for you. Biblically based, family-oriented, dynamic fellowship. There were actually a whole lot more of those, but those were just some of the ones that I pulled down. And that does a fair job of describing the ministry of a church and kind of giving you an idea as to what they were about. What if I asked you to do that for God? What if I asked you to take the whole of who God is and come up with just one sentence that gives at least the best description possible of who God is, of what He's about, of what He's like? What would we say?
Sacrificial, loving, caring.
We could rattle off His attributes and what have you, which those are, and those are good things. But the sentence would turn into a paragraph. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, how could you condense just a few short words all that God is? Well, lucky for us this morning, God did that for us. I want us to look at a passage this morning in Deuteronomy chapter 6. We're going to start down in verse 4. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Hear, O Israel." Now, I don't know about you. I'm sure in most of your houses growing up, as it was in mine, there was sort of an implied meaning that goes along with the word "hear." My dad, whenever he would be, and it was mostly my dad, my mom would do this sometimes, but it was mostly my dad. Whenever he would ask, be telling me something, did you hear me? Well, he wasn't asking did I, hear the sounds that are coming out of his mouth. He wasn't asking me if I just picked up on the sound waves. No, he was asking, did I understand? Was I listening? Was I paying attention to what he was saying? And sometimes to make sure that I was, he would ask me, okay, then, what did I say? And that's usually where I would get trapped because I wasn't very good at listening all the time. Now, I would kind of hear, but I'd take my own. Anybody else guilty of that? Anybody? Thank you, I'm not alone. Hallelujah. Well, this morning, the very first thing that's written down is, "Hear, O Israel." Now, this passage is this one verse is referred to as the Shema. And this is a cornerstone verse for Jewish belief, for Jewish society, Jewish culture. It is a very crucial one, and it's called the Shema because the very first word is Shema, which means hear. They weren't being lazy about naming the verse. They didn't come across and say, okay, this is a very important verse. We need to name it. We need to identify it to set it apart. And so we're just, the first word is Shema. That sounds cool. We're going to run with that. They didn't do it because of that. They did it because of the significance of the word. Hear, understand, pay attention, Israel, to what is about to be said. Catch this, grasp it, pay close attention, take it to heart. Look at what goes on to be said in the rest of the passage. To bind it, to make it as frontlets, to teach it, to talk about it. He says, hear, O Israel. Hear, pay attention, lean in, ignore, shut out everything else, and pay attention to this. Hear, O Israel. The Lord our God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. Yahweh. That's anytime you see the Lord like that, that's Yahweh. Now in Hebrew society, in Hebrew culture, whenever they would come to that in the reading of a passage, they wouldn't say Yahweh, they would say Adonai, because they were afraid that they might have some unconfessed sin in their life, and by saying God's name, his proper name, that they would associate him with that sin. So they would say Adonai. But here we see, hear, O Israel, the Lord, Yahweh, a personal, we know his name. And then I love the next word, our. That hidden little jewel right there in the midst of it. The Lord, our God. It's personal. It's not some distant thing. When Moses was writing this through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, when God was telling him, this is what I want you to write, he said, I want you to put in our, the Lord, our God. And imagine Moses, as he's writing this down. Moses had a unique relationship with God. He was in the presence of God so much so that his facial features changed, not his literal features, but his face shone so much so that the children of Israel asked him to cover his face because it was blinding to them, because the presence of God was radiating off of him. This is personal. This is intimate. And Moses, as he's writing this down, he would have been thinking of this. The Lord, our God. The Lord, my God. This personal, intimate, fatherly relationship. This relationship of instruction, of caring so much. I don't know about you, but anybody who cares enough will share instruction with me, will share counsel with me. That's why my dad and my mom taught me. They loved me. They didn't want to see me hurt. They didn't want to see me injured. They wanted to see me do well. And so they instructed me. And so you have the Lord our God caring and loving enough that he is instructing. And he's not just saying it so that he can say it so that he can waste breath. He's saying, hear, understand, I am speaking, I care, I love you. I am your God. You know my name. I am your God. You are my people. Hear what I am about to say. Hear, O Israel, you chosen people, set aside for my purposes and my reasons. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God. The Lord is one. All my life, I had only ever heard this taught in one way. And it was usually in relation to the fact that Israel was a monotheistic nation.
Monotheistic.
About to cover that. Thank you. Good question, Joseph. Way to be on that. Monotheistic means that they worshipped one God. This was a radical thing in this day and age. Because up to this point, there had been no other monotheistic nation. All other people groups, they were polytheistic, meaning they worshipped many gods. They had a God for everything. Look at the Greeks and the Romans as the most well-known, that had Zeus, the god of thunder, and Ares, the god of war, and I don't remember if that was Ares, but it doesn't matter. But they had all these different gods for all these different things, and they worshipped them. And here is God making a statement of himself that, behold, O Israel, I am one. I am one. I am monotheistic. I am singular. And you are my people, and I am your God. So it's Israel saying, it's a pronouncement to Israel that I am your God. I am it. I'm the only one that you worship. And this set Israel apart from every other society and every other culture that they were surrounded by. All these pagan cultures that worshipped everything. And they were thought of as weird and odd because they only worshipped one God. And they worshipped all these others. And just sheer numbers. We have more gods. We're better than you. And yet the children of Israel went in and they conquered the promised land through the leadership of God, through the provision of God. They conquered it, so it was a statement of God's power and authority over anything and everyone else. But that's not all that that verse proclaims. That's not all that it teaches. See, yes, it does teach that God is one. God is singular. He's not many. Yes, we do understand that there is the Trinity. Okay? I'm not going to get into the whole depths of that because, well, it's a deep subject and this format does not allow for it that well. But God is the Trinity. He's one in nature, one in essence, three in person. Okay? But He is still one. Everybody, does that simplify it enough for this morning? All right, the foreheads that said they were awake are nodding their heads. Thank you. The second thing that it declares is probably the most impacting. Yes, it declares that God is one. He is singular. But it's also a declaration that God is it. There is no other. This is a statement against the nations that were around. This is why Israel was chosen, to teach and to proclaim who God is to the people that was around Him. All these peoples, all these nations, all these cultures, all these religions were worshiping all these other deities, all these other gods. And here is God saying, "Hear, O Israel, get this, understand it. I am your God, and I am one, and I am it. There is no other God. There is no other deity. All these people that are around you, that I am sending you into their presence, they worship something that is not real. It does not exist." This is a statement of absolution that God is saying, I am all there is. I'm it. There is no other. None before me, none beside me. I alone am God. And by the fact that He gives His name twice in that passage, Yahweh. Yahweh in and of itself means I am. God in this one sentence shows His personality, shows His love, shows His caring, shows His concern, shows His sovereignty, His power, His grace and His mercy in choosing the children of Israel to share who He is with the world that is around Him. He is showing His whole being by saying, I am God and I am it. Hear, Israel, understand what I am saying. Get this, because it is life-changing. It is everything that you need to know. I am God. I am everything. I am one. I am only. Hear, O Israel, the Lord, Yahweh, our God, the Lord is one. He is it. He is singular. There is nothing else. It is a bold statement against everything else, saying that there is nothing else that exists apart from God. He is one. Imagine the impact of this. The whole reason. This is what the children of Israel were to teach their children. They were to meditate on it. It was meant to be passed on from generation to generation. Because this is the one thing, if you don't get this, you miss everything else. God is saying this is of the utmost importance. Behold, hear, listen, understand, Israel. I'm all there is, and I'm all you need. It's a 1-2 punch. It's a statement of absolution, and it is what the children of Israel needed to do. It's how they needed to live. And what is the response that we are to have to that? How are we supposed to respond to that? How are the children of Israel supposed to respond to that? Well, that's the invitation for us this morning. And it's verse 5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. My dad taught on this passage once, and I love the point that he brought out in that last line, that your might. It's with all your muchness, with everything that you are, to love God with everything that you are, holding nothing back. Jesus referenced this when He was asked, what is the greatest commandment? When they were trying to trap Him, He referred back to this passage. The result of Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The outworking of that, the application, the take-home for it, is that as a result of God being all that there is, that you are to love God with all that you are. In the Greek, Jesus used the word agape for love, which is that self-sacrificing. It is saying, God, you are everything, and it's nothing of me. I completely surrender all that I am, all that I ever will be, all that I have to you, to your glory, to the advancement of your kingdom, to the spreading of your word, to telling those that are around me that you are one and only. God, I love you with everything that I am. I will put nothing before you. I give my life completely and totally to you. God, you are it. That is how we are to respond. That is how the children of Israel were being taught to respond in direct relation to finding out that God is one. He is it. He wants that personal relationship. He wants that connection. He wants to be your one and only above anything and everything. Work is fine. Family is fine. Friends are fine. But God is to be your whole reason for existence. When we understand that God is to be it, and that we are to love Him with everything that we have, with everything that we are in this life of missionary service, of evangelistic living to the world, becomes a lot easier. Because then all of a sudden it's not about the entrapments of this world, the things that we can't give up. It's about what we will be doing for God. That's why Paul said, for me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. God was it for Paul. He was it. It was nothing else. His very life was meaningless apart from God. And that's what the Shema teaches. That God is it. You need nothing else.
Shema, what is that?
It's the Hebrew word for hear. It's the very first word in verse 4. That's what that passage is called. It's okay, Joseph. God is it. Our response is one of love, one of obedience. Church, this morning, we need to hear. We need to be reminded of the fact that God is it. He's it. He's all we need. We don't need possessions. We don't need belongings. We don't need food and water and clothing. We don't need buildings. We don't need all these other things. We need God and God alone. Because the thing is, when we get that right, He provides everything else that we need. He meets our needs. He sustains us. Because we're not dependent upon food. Yesterday I spent the day out working, building a bunch of different things. I got hungry at one point. All of a sudden I couldn't really go on that much longer without getting some food in my stomach. I was dependent upon food. So I had to go up to McDonald's, which is fake food, and get something to eat just in order to be able to keep going. But see, we should be so dependent on God that when we haven't had our time in prayer, our time in the Word, our time in just, God, what do you want from me today? Just talking to Him, just listening. When we haven't had that time, we find that we can't go on. We can't survive. We can't sustain. God is to be everything. We are to love God with everything we have, with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our strength, with all our muchness, with all our soul, with our very being, with our very life. We are to love God, surrendering all that we are for His glory, because He's it. We don't even have life and death apart from Him. This morning, the invitation is, are you loving God? He's all there is. But are you loving Him? Is your life exemplifying that? Is it embodying it? Or like the children of Israel, who oftentimes wandered off, strayed, went and worshipped false idols, and ended up going into captivity time and time again. They needed to be reminded that their whole purpose, their whole reason for existence is God. Are you loving God this week? Sacrificing all that you are for all that He is. Being completely and totally surrendered and obedient to who He is.